excuse me, here we are ready to put the window back together and the door. So what you see here is the result of actually a couple of days worth of effort. This has been kind of a nightmare. As I went through the wrecking yard, I couldn't find a good window or door panel to replace the ones that I had. And I finally found a window that I thought was the right one. I got it, and when I got back here, it wasn't a perfect match. And the door panel was a similar deal. I found the best one I could find, and turns out that it's the wrong color down here, but I figured from side to side you're not hardly going to notice it. But more importantly, this cloth panel was wrong, and so I've had to take it apart. And this is something that happens when you're doing a low buck restoration project. It happens frequently, and you've got to be willing to substitute some of your time for money if you're going to save money on these things. So I could have gone in and ordered a whole new window glass if I wanted to, but I want, the whole point here is to save money. So I managed to be able to take this apart. Each of these, where there are now bolts in here, this track was riveted to the glass, and so I had to cut those rivets out and replace them with bolts. And then there's two of these deals here, and you can't see the other side, but it's got a pin on it, and one of those pins was broken off, and I had to take one of those out, and the ones I got on the new window from the wrecking yard weren't quite the same, and so I actually had to take this one right here and very carefully with a grinder cut it down and thin it out in depth this way, and just completely reshape it so that it would work. But I believe I finally got myself a window that's ready to function and go back in there. And then with the door panel, the real thing here, I had to take it clear apart. Well, especially I had to take that cloth piece off, and it, get her flipped around on the back here. I still have a couple of things I need to do with it. So it was held into the door panel by having some pins that were built into the plastic backing here that came through these holes and then were melted in place. And so in order to get that out, I had to pop all of those loose from there. And I was like, geez, how am I going to put that back together? But then I remembered my windshield urethane trick. And so I've glued it back together with windshield urethane, and that dang stuff is so strong, it's unbelievable. But I think we're all good to go there. I have to take these staples and put them back through the original holes that were in there and crimp them over on the other sides, but then I think I'll have that ready to go. And I'll glue that chunk of pad back down flat where it's supposed to be. So I think we're all good to go there now, and I'm going to start putting this door back together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this glass down inside of the door, and I'm going to try to use some rubber tip clamps that I have and pinch that glass here and here so that it will sit in there. And then I'll get inside the door and start putting my regulator and pieces together as I go, because it's kind of a complicated deal on this one. But anyway, we're going to get that done and press forward, and I'll take some more pictures for you here. Alright, so this little trick here helped a lot with those two clamps that have rubber noses holding that window up about halfway in there. And so much easier to tell how it has to go back together when you have it out. But when you're wrestling around inside and you can't see anything, it's hard to tell. So anyway, there's two rollers on this regulator, and one of them is on an arm that pivots like this, and you have to have that arm over pivoted this way, so you stick its roller in first. Then you have to lift the window and that arm up and get it to where it's positioned in this angle. And then you have the fixed arm, which is tied to this roller right here. And it's its turn to go in next. And you have to get it into this track, and then you can shove everything farther back in there. And that was how I got to that point so far. Next, I believe I have this short little track piece that goes in here and bolts into this hole and that hole. And I believe I've got to get it on the other white roller on the regulator and get it in place. And after that, I have this other piece of long track here, and I think I've got it upside down and backwards. So it needs to fasten on this roller right there that you can barely see, that black roller. Needs to slip into it by taking this bolt and this little plug out here, and then you get them on that, and then you get that into place back into these two holes or three holes here. And I think that will start to get us to where we've got all the tracks lined up, and it should be almost the point where we can plug the wires back into that motor and make it work. And well, then we've got to get the motor back up, and it's got a hook that hooks in this hole, and then we have the 4 rivets again that have to go back in it to hold it in place. And that should have all the mechanism where it's ready to function. We'll probably have to adjust a little bit and things at that point, but that's where we're going from here. So we'll show you when we get that far. All right, finally got this glass in, and this is one of the more difficult ones I've ever done, honestly. So I think I've kind of explained a couple things. This is not going to be the greatest how-to video. I'm sorry about that, but once we got the glass in there and I got the regulator started like I talked about, where I got the 2 rollers into that track that goes along the bottom of the window, that was kind of really the beginning point. Then the next thing I did was came down and put this little short chunk of track in that goes right here, and just all of these bolts got snugged up temporarily as I did this. And then I started trying to get my rivet holes to align over here with the regulator, and I had to hook up the power to it and be able to move it up and down a little bit, which was really awkward and hard to do with the window flopping around in there too. But you have to do that to get those holes lined up. And what I found is they send these factory rivets that we've talked about before to go in those holes, and that's all well and good, except they are the next size bigger than any rivet gun that almost anybody has. I think there's a big 2-handed professional rivet gun that does those, and I looked all over and couldn't find one. Finally gave up, and I was able, by putting each of them in with the regulator in a different position almost, I was able to finally get 4 bolts to go in there, and I had some bolts and nuts and washers to go on those. Yeah, they don't all match, I get that, but they're there and they'll hold. That's what I did. You might have that rivet gun or have access to it. Good for you, go for it. But it is possible to do it with bolts and nuts. So you do want to make sure that the nuts you're using have a locking feature to them to kind of grab on there so that they don't slip out and move around. So then once I got that in place, then I was able to come over here and get this vertical track right here put on, and get it mounted in its 2 spots or 3 spots here, and that really helped stabilize the thing a lot. And I did kind of the same thing that I did when we replaced the hood, which I think we lost that video, but anyway, these nuts all have a nut shadow or a place you can tell where they were at before, and I recommend that you start by tightening them back into that position, and that's usually going to be where they were for ages and ages in the car. And start there. You may have to adjust some, but then there's really after that, I mean, I put them back in the places they were from the factory and they worked fine. The only adjustments I've had to do is there is a height stop adjustment here, and there's another one right here. And I had to monkey around with those a little bit to get my window to go up to the right position to where it would sit correctly in this seal around the, that goes on the door jamb here around the window. And I had to monkey with that just a little bit, but I got it to where it's adjusted correctly. Then I came in here and put these two things here. There's one there and one over here. And because this is the part that I had to modify to get to fit, I also had to modify this piece to get it to work. But I've got those in there. And now, check this out. My window doesn't move back and forth. It's awesome. And it goes up and down the way that it's supposed to. Yeah, just because it makes me feel good. Here you go. There it goes all the way down, all the way back up. Hey, it stops in just the right spot. Oh yeah, one other thing that I better mention here. This is where the speaker goes, and mine was bad anyway, so I was going to replace it, but you need that out of there so that you can get in and access a bunch of the bolts and things. It's just way easier. It's got 3 bolts holding it in and a plug on the wires. Simple, pull it out, and that'll help you get back in place. And after you've got all that in place, then I had to bolt in the bracket for the mirror. It's got 3 bolts holding it in place, and then had to put the mirror itself on. And as you can see, I haven't plugged it in yet, but that's the next thing we'll do here. And at that point, this baby works, which I'm happy about. That was a lot of work getting to that point. But now I can have my interior sealed up, and I'll get my door panel finished putting back together, and then put it on there. Get the speaker, my new junkyard speakers that I got that I think are better. I'll put one of them in here. And I patched up the piece of plastic that I got here, and I hope I can get it back together without breaking anything else. I'm not quite sure how they're supposed to go together, but we're going to learn by the time we get done here. And next time you see this, I'll have that door panel on, and she'll be functional. So I'm stoked and excited about that. That's been one of the biggest parts of the project so far. So there we go. And that wraps it up pretty much. Well, I'll do a final shot with the door panel on for our window regulator replacement video series. Well, there we go. We got her almost 100% of the way there. I'm going to stop for tonight because I've got a broken part that this little switch bezel there doesn't stay down in. I think the clips are broken off of it, so I need to figure something out there or what. I've got a lot of pressure on it with the wires behind it, but we've got her all functioning. Yeah, my keys are out. And window rolls up and down. I was having some problem with it hitting those wires a while ago, but we got that solved. There we go. So now we've got a great functioning door. And just in case, I don't want to lock myself out here. Grab the keys and bingo. There she goes. Alright, I'm super glad to have that done. That was a massive project. Alright, now we'll get on with the painting and some of those other pieces that have to go together there. My engine's supposed to be here in the next day or two. Actually, an engine and tranny that I picked up out of an 88,000 mile car. So we'll get that process moving too. I'm excited. It feels like it's coming together now.